At the beginning of the 20th century, physics was radically changed by the theory of relativity proposed by Albert Einstein. And one of the fundamental categories of classical physics, that category being time, of absolute time within the context of Newtonian science, was radically upended by Einstein. And the way that we view time within the context of physics fundamentally changed. And when I say fundamentally changed, it changed on a categorical level. Now, of course, this naturally raised a bunch of questions for philosophers who've been writing about time for the past, I don't know, 2,000 years or so in both the Eastern and the Western traditions. Time has always been a major topic of philosophy. And Einstein changed this discussion by presenting us with a radically new conception of time, a new conception of the universe. And one of the things that emerged out of Einsteinian relativity, specifically with the advent of our modern notion of space time, is the idea of a block universe, of a timeless universe, in which the tenses that we use to refer to time, past, present, and future, no longer carry ontological significance or are no longer fundamentally basic to our picture of the universe as a whole. And this raises some very serious questions and a one major problem. And that problem is that we have a basic experience of time that is at odds with the picture of time that science is presenting to us. So hopefully you followed that so far, because today we're going to be engaging with one of the most preeminent philosophers of our time, Katt Williams. It was hard for me to say that with a straight face. Katt Williams is a phenomenal comedian, one of the most preeminent comedians of our time. I've been listening to Katt Williams maybe since I've been listening to comedy. Really, he's always been a part of the comedy picture, as far as I'm aware. Not to date myself too much here, but I figured I would cover this because I was listening to the Theo podcast. Theo, pictured here, another comedian who was having a conversations with Katt Williams. And it kind of surprised me because at the beginning of the conversation, they go into a rather existential conversation about the nature of time that kind of caught me off guard. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about what Katt and Theo have to say about time. So let's go ahead and jump into it.
Yeah. And I start to think, man, I'm running out of time too. If you really like to taste different things and smell different flowers and, and see what's on in different gardens and stuff, then you start to run out of time. No, you don't think?
I love how Katt just stares at Theo and is just like, no, no, that's not true. No, just completely, completely dismisses Theo's thought there, and then elaborates a little bit on his point. So,
When you can make those things happen. Like you can do everything on that list of yours in 2025 with no fucking sweat. And your biggest problem in 26 is I gotta have a new list. Mm. Yeah. Time is one of the main things that's made up. Yeah, you think? I know.
so time is one of the main things that's made up. Now, I'm gonna elaborate a little bit on Katt was saying, and maybe take it in a direction that he did not intend. I don't quite know what Katt meant by that, but going back to what I kind of outlined at the beginning of the video, one of the things that Einstein showed was a rejection of time in the classical sense. And what I mean by that is within the Newtonian universe, within the model of the universe that was presented to us by Isaac Newton in his Principia, Newton posited that both time and space were absolute, that both time and space were, so to speak, fundamental properties of the universe, that time existed everywhere in the universe, and that there was one single time that ran throughout the universe, so to speak. What Einstein showed us beginning in 1905, when he started to outline his theory of relativity, is that absolute notions of time, such as absolute notions of simultaneity, didn't hold. Instead, what we have to posit are relative measurements of time. Time as it's measured relative to a specific observer. And this has to do with the constant of the speed of light. Einstein, of course, gives a lot of thought experiments and examples to elaborate on that. If you want to go into the more academic aspect, I have several videos on my channel where I cover, for example, the debate that happened between Einstein and Bergson and Bachelard and Bergson, both of which cover Einstein's ideas in a little bit more depth. Of course, my background is not physics, it's the history and philosophy of science. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm covering this more from a historical and philosophical perspective. But the idea that time is not real comes directly from Einstein. And what we mean by not real, that can do a lot of work. And you hear there's like a popular meme now that, well, time's not real, so none of it really matters. What people mean by not real is typically not what physicists mean by not real. Time can still be utilized as a series of measurements. What we mean in philosophy when we say something's not real relates to that thing's ontology. So the branch of philosophy called ontology deals with existence. Does something exist, and what does it mean for something to exist? And some philosophers of time nowadays would deny the ontology, would deny the existence of time on the basis that time is no longer a thing. Time cannot be thought of as a substance, so to speak. It has no intrinsic or inherent properties. Nowadays, if you accept a block theory of the universe and most interpretations of relativity and quantum mechanics, time is something that is measured relative between objects or an observer. So it has no absolute or ontological basis. Its inherent quality, if we can even use that language, is it's relational. It has to do with the relationship between an observer and an object. It is not a fundamental property of the universe, if any of that made sense. So what Katt is saying, that time is not real, is true on a philosophical, scientific level. But of course, what we're talking about within the context of this conversation is that big question that I raised at the beginning. How does that relate to my experience of time? And Katt and Theo will actually provide some existential explanations for what that might mean for us as individuals in our temporal experience. So let's let them elaborate on that.
Control, and it puts things in its place, and that's what time does for us, so that we're able to keep track, but the less you deal with time, you realize you have the right amount of time to do everything you got to do every day, 24 hours. And you could make it an adventure every fucking day. Like, hey, I could die tomorrow. What would that mean I would need to be doing today? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, not looking at it like, oh, I'm running out of time. No, 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 no. Dead people ran out of time. Everybody else alive.
Dead people have run out of time. Those of us who are still alive have time. And so this is what I mean about the existential elaboration, because one of the, let's say, repercussions of the Einsteinian universe is it kind of presents a undermining of a position known as determinism. And philosophical determinism is the belief that one's life has been predetermined, whether we talk about this biologically, that we've been predetermined by our genetics, by our social upbringing, by our psychology. You can even talk about determinism within the context of theology, that our lives have been predetermined or preordained by God or by the universal harmony or ultimate reality or whatever it is. And a lot of people, when they think about the time of their lives, will naturally frame it with, whether they realize they're doing this or not, will naturally frame it within a sort of deterministic context. And this is because of how we view our temporal experience in terms of the passage of time. That the passage of time, what I'm talking about there is the movement of time and our experience, the movement of time going from our past to our present, and in a sense, kind of pushing us or leading us into the future. The philosopher that I study, Gaston Bachelard, critiques a different philosopher named Henry Bergson. And one of the things that Bergson argued is for this vital energy that is pushing and moving life, big picture, moving life along through evolution, and that moves each one of us along through our lives. And one of the ways that Bergson categorized time was talking about it in terms of duration, that we all have this strong sense and feeling that we have endured. And one of Bachelard's big critiques of Bergson is that this creates, within the context of the individual's lives, it actually creates a form of determinism in which the individual feels compelled to act and to move in a particular direction because of their past. But what Katt is pointing out, and what other existentialist philosophers have pointed out, if there is no inherent ontology to time, if there is no fundamental substance or attributes of time, then this feeling of being compelled or being pushed in a particular direction by our past is just that. It's a feeling. It's not real, right? Because time is not real. And what Katt said here reminds me of a quote by the existentialist philosopher Jean Paul Sartre. This comes from Sartre's novel, The Devil and the Good Lord. Do you think that I count the days? There is only one day left, always starting over. It is given to us at dawn and taken away from us at dusk. Bachelard will argue that there is an inherent freedom that comes along with relativity because we have been freed, so to speak, from this temporal fate. The idea that our temporal narrative is only moving in one direction. We have the ability to act and to move otherwise because there is nothing about the past that compels the present in any one particular direction. There's always the moment of the instant which can allow us to pivot. There's a fundamental, according to Bachelard, a fundamental separation of the present from the past. And I think this is best summarized in a quote by the French philosopher and poet Jean Lescure, who is commenting on Bachelard's philosophy. Let me make this full screen so you can read along with me. And this is what Lescure says in a book that he wrote called An Introduction to Bachelard's Poetics. This quote in this section of the book can also be found at the end of the English translation of Bachelard's Intuition of the Instant. And this is what Lescure has to say. The paths towards purification presuppose the possibility of reiterated births. They call for the instant to shatter temporal fate, for discontinuity to authorize surprising events. If the cruelest morning is the consciousness of a future betrayed, the obstinate evidence of time as purveyor of wonder, surprise, and novelty is indeed associated with the initial revelation of suffering, with this interruption of the plundering instant. That which thrust me into the jaws of death is also that which offers me a chance to be reborn. For never, not for a single moment, are we the sum of our past. Each instant discovered is what grants new sense at every instant to the senseless history that we have lived so far. It is what grants our efforts some of the meaning we need in order to seize the soul that shall be ours. All right, so some brief existentialist ponderings from the comedian Katt Williams related to some of the thoughts that I have been thinking and reading and writing about recently. Anyway, let me know what you think about what Katt has to say. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.